How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today was Daf Mem, Daf 40 of himself, the Nazir, friends. Daf 40, so first of all, I think we're basically going to leave Mem Amud Beis alone for two reasons. A, because it kind of gets into this longer thing that really goes throughout Mem Aleph. So I was thinking maybe we'll just do it all in one go tomorrow. And also I didn't review the whole Amud Beis, which basically was like, alright, well, instead of reviewing it now, let's just do it tomorrow. But ultimately, it's because really it talks about a machlokas, and it only gets halfway through the machlokas on Daf Mem Amud Beis. So I figured let's just do Mem Amud Beis and Mem Aleph. Is that okay, guys? Thanks. All right, which means that today should probably be pretty quick, I actually think. So, all right, we're on Daf Mem. So the main thing then that we're going to talk today about is how do we know that a mitzorah you have to use a razor when you remove the hair from the mitzorah. So we're going to start off Mem Amud Aleph about already like 10 lines into the page by the two dots. Tanan Awesome, we learned Darton in Masechta Negoyim. Shloshim Galchim v'Tiglachta Mitzvah. There are three individuals who the Torah dictates that we need to remove their hair, and it's a mitzvah. Nazir, Mitzorah, v'Levim. So Nazir, of course, after his experience is complete, Mitzorah, and a Mitzorah when he's no longer a Mitzorah, so we remove his hair, v'Levim, and it says in the Torah that when the Levim became inaugurated to be the Levim, we had to remove their hair. Now, if you didn't use a razor in any of these contexts, Shishiru Shtei Cyrus, or two hairs were remaining, loss of lo klum, you did gunished, you did nothing. We just said mitzvah. We just said that there are three instances where there is hair removal and it's a mitzvah. Pshita, obviously it's a mitzvah. The Torah says. The Torah says you got to remove the hair. Obviously it's a mitzvah. So ma'udetema mishum avure seyahu va'afilu sach nosha kamaj mandelo. No, the point is that we need to migalchin. Right, you have to use something like a shaver. You can't use just some kind of chemicals or something. It has to be like a shaving kind of activity. Okay. Now, now we had said that in all instances you have to use a razor. Now, Nazir, I understand why a Nazir needs to use a razor. It says, don't use a razor. Right? And we had implied, at least according to the Tanakama yesterday, that when you're a Nazir, you can't use a razor, but when you're no longer a Nazir, when you were shaving you after the experience, so then you do use a razor. By the Levim, it says, use a razor on their flesh. How do we know that a mitzorah, when we remove all of his hair, how do we know that that's with a razor? If you're going to suggest, well, just learn it from the Levim. Just like you have to remove hair from the Levim and it's with a razor. So I'll say just like by Levim you remove the hair with the razor. So we'll say so the same thing. Let's just assume the same for a mitzorah as well. You say, well, you can't just assume that well, the Levites, the Levi situation is a more stringent situation to begin with, because the Levites, you have to pick them up. Tenufa begufim, you have to pick them up. You have to pick up their bodies, you have to pick them up. And because there's that additional factor to the Levites that makes it more stringent, and because it's more stringent, we have more stringent halachis, like you have to use a razor specifically by the Levites. Tomer b'mitzorah delo, but by a mitzorah you don't have to pick up the dude, and therefore it has less requirements, and maybe therefore the razor requirement is also not included. So let's learn from Nazir. So why don't we know that from a Nazir? Just like a Nazir, you got to cut his hair and use a razor. So by a mitzorah also, when you cut his hair, you use a razor. But by a Nazir, as we've learned, his korban shlamim, you have to offer bread with it, unleavened bread, but bread with it, lechem with it. So, but by mitzorah you don't. So because Nazir has that more stringent detail to it that you have to bring lechem with it. So also there's a detail that you have to use a razor, but I can argue that maybe the mitzvah you don't need a razor. Ella mechada lo asa. So now the Gemara tries to take a different route. Okay, so we can't learn it out from individually, right? We failed to learn out the razor requirement for mitzvah from Nazir, and we failed to learn it out from the Leviim. So teisi mitavayin. So let's see if we can learn it out from the combination of both, a combination of the Leviim and the Nazir. Ma mehei teisi. Now, just sort of reiterating the logic, because we wouldn't be able to learn it out from either one individually, from the Nazir or from the Levi individual, the Leviim individually, because Teisi mi Leviim, if you try to learn it out from Leviim, ma Leviim, shekentun and tenufa begufan, Leviim are more stringent because you have to pick up their body, which you don't have to do by a mitzorah. Nazir yochiach, okay, but then let's try to learn out from Nazir, where you don't have to lift up the body. But ma le Nazir sheken korbanu ta'un lechem, yeah, but by the korban, but by the Nazir, their korban requires bread, which is not the case by the mitzorah. Levim yochichu. Okay, so then why don't we try learning out from the Levim, which doesn't require the lechem? Because but then we say the same thing, right? That but the Levim, you have to pick up the body. So loriza kirizev, loriza kirizet. Look, the Levim have their problem, and the Nazir have their problem. Right, we can't learn it out from the Levim because you have to pick up the body. You can't learn it out from the Nazir because it has the bread and the korban. But atzara shavish shaboyim. But why don't we just focus on what they have in common? What the Nazir and the Levim have in common is sheintun tiglachas v'tiglachtem besar. That at the end of the day, both the Nazir and the Levim, what they have in common is that you have to remove the hair, and you remove the hair with a razor. So let's just say, look, each one has its own details, but what they have in common is that you have to remove the hair with a razor. So say also that by the mitzorah you have to remove the hair with the razor. But still, I could still ask, but still, I could still say that Nazir and Levim are more stringent than Mitzorah, because a poor Mitzorah, can bring birds as opposed to lambs. And therefore, we see that a Mitzorah is more lenient in that respect, that you can bring a lesser expensive korban if you can't afford a more expensive one. So we see that we're more lenient in that respect, so maybe we could also be more lenient in respect to not having to use a razor. So, and we're gonna hold it here, because after this we really get into a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanon, which is really going to take us through Mem Aleph. So I think we're going to stop here, which means that today's daf was very, very short. Tomorrow then it's going to be longer. But okay, so on today's daf we tried to learn out how do we know that a mitzorah requires shaving with a razor. Now, you might be thinking, wait, yesterday didn't we try to learn out Nazir from mitzorah, right? There was a Havmina yesterday that can't we just assume that mitzorah uses a razor, so a Nazir should use a razor? We said, well, mitzorah is more stringent because you have to do the whole body as opposed to Nazir just the head, i.e. it was taken for granted yesterday that a mitzorah taka does use a razor. So that's taka, the Gemara is going to ask the kasha next, which is going to be actually the segue into the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanon, which we'll get to tomorrow. Friends, that was Daf Mem of Masechta Nazir. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.